I'm Ciarán Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will release insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this week's episode we're joined by Tomás O'Toole, who is a participant in the Teagasc Better Farm Sheep programme. Tomás is joined in this episode by sheep specialist Damian Costello. Tomás is farming in Moyard, just outside of Clifden Co Galway, and runs a split lowland and hill flock as well as a suckler weaning system. We start off with Tomás giving us a bit more detail about each of these systems. We discuss the changes in his flock over the past number of years and his decision around two separate sheep enterprises, his breeding decisions and the progress and challenges he's encountered on the way. We move on to discuss the move away from selling store lambs to finishing all lambs on the farm and his reasons for doing so. Damian explains to us how this suits Tomás's farm but has limitations for others. With lighter hill lambs housed in October, we discuss the indoor finishing period of these and how Tomás feels is delivering a greater margin for his system. We finish up with Damian highlighting the need for regular drafting and assessing fat cover on these type of lambs during an intensive finishing period. We start off, however, with Tomás giving us a bit of background of his farm and the system he's running.
So I'm farming in west coast of Ireland in Connemara, just on the outskirts of Clifden. We have a lowland sheep flock, a hill flock and a suckler system. So around the farm here, we run all the lowland sheep. Basically, there's around 9 hectares of lowland around the farm. Then the cows are a little bit away from that. They're on a kind of little bit of leased land. And then the hill sheep are on a commonage and enclosed hilly type ground on an out farm. So the 3 systems are kind of running separately altogether.
You've kind of 3 separate blocks running there at the one time, and
yeah.
The home farm does go back on to some hill ground as well.
It does, yeah. It goes back onto a little bit of the same. It's kind of, well, I suppose it's an enclosed private hill, which allows me to dry off ewes on it and dry off the cows on it as well, as needed.
Look, the system's gone through a bit of change in the last couple of years. I suppose the suckler one has remained pretty much stable. That's the suckler, the weaning system. So maybe just give me a run through the sheep system. You have a hill and a lowland system, and they've changed a wee bit over the last number of years.
Yeah, well, when I joined up with the Better Farm program, one of the things that we hit straight away was splitting up the hill and lowland, because they were all running together as one system. And obviously, it wasn't very cost effective for the hill sheep to be looked after as well as the lowland. And I wasn't utilising my hill at all, really. I was only using it for really drying off the ewes. So it's since then we've split them up completely, and then we're running them as 2 individual flocks. They don't ever really cross over at all, and they kind of have their own ground, so they don't need to be using each other's ground, if that makes sense. And it's working very well, actually, because obviously the hill ewes are using the commonage and using that lower inner ground as well a lot more now. And the fact that we've split it up and we got the soil management side of things right and improved it a bit, we're getting more grazing period out of it, so it's helping a lot.
So what was in that flock originally? So they were mixed, they were doing a lot. It was essentially running more or less as a lowland flock, was it?
Yeah, it would have been. Yes, it would have been. It would have been running between the 2 places, I guess. And we would have been traditionally still using the hill, but it would only for really be drying off sheep, after weaning. They wouldn't have been out there, any longer than a month and a half, to be honest with you. And you would have come up here for lambing time. You'd have your traditional blackface or your lanark type in with your lowland lambing down at the same time. So there was a mixture of lambs there running together. If that makes sense, at the time of weaning.
So, right, you split them flocks up. You're increasing numbers over the last number of years. Your lowland flock is an entirely separate enclosed flock to itself. You're not producing a replacement straight off the hill, are you?
Yeah. Well, the lowland flock, then what we did with that was we introduced Belclares, obviously, for more proliferancy, and we're moving forward with them now. We have a lot of them kept as replacements, so they'll be coming up as hobbits next year. And then obviously what we would hope to in time maybe is that we might use the hill flock for replacements down the line, possibly introducing another type of ram to them when we have the numbers and the stock levels right. But at the moment we're They're not interlinked at the moment. That makes sense. They're not brought together at the moment because I'm just trying to get the numbers right. So I'm keeping all my ewe lambs on both flocks for the last couple of years just to get the numbers up.
That's just what I want to ask you. Like your hill flock is running entirely. You're crossing them back to blackface to hold them, to build them numbers. You're not doing any crossing really on the hill flock.
Not at the moment, no. No, I hope to in the future. That was one of the plans that we have in place, but it's just not happening at the moment. No, I don't think it'll be long away. Because the numbers are getting there. We're getting up there, but it's just to maintain it. And because obviously from a financial point of view, I'd like to be able to sell surplus ewe lambs as well. Down the line, but at the moment I haven't been able to do that. So
on your hill ewes, there was some Lanark in it, was a traditional Mayo Connemara flock. You've crossed back with Lanark now for the last couple of years on them ewes.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, just I actually like the Lanark, so I'd say now 50% of the flock or more would be more Lanark cross type ewes.
I suppose, Tomás, one of the challenges you faced over the last number of years, they were still spending a lot of time on the lowland ground, and as a result, they tended to go into mating in very good condition. You tended to have a very high scan on that hill flock too. Has that pulled back slightly as you push the mules back more on the hill?
Yeah, because even this year going to the ram now, we could see the condition score of the ewes was down a little bit. So, at scanning time, we'd see the true results of that. Obviously the ewes spent a lot more time on the hill last year, so that would have brought their condition score down. Now it wasn't bad or they weren't weak or anything like that, but it was down over the past few years in regards to the last few years of them going to the ram.
I suppose put that in context for our listeners, they were in exceptionally good condition every other year. They're back to more where you would expect a good condition hill flock this year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was, I suppose it would have been around the right condition score for a traditional hill ewe going to the ram.
Damian, I'm just going to bring you in on this one. Like, that was one of the challenges. The ewes, whereas you do want them in good condition going around, that higher scan, the more twins in it, they had to spend a lot more time on the low ground, which in some ways defeats your long-term purpose of getting that flock back to the hill.
Yeah, that's right, Ciarán. Yeah, and as Tomás said there, I suppose they would have been particularly good when we took the condition score on the hill flock for the last couple of years. They would have been particularly good, and this was reflected then in a very low barn rate for a hill flock. To be it was less than 5% there a couple of years, and also probably, if it makes sense, a slightly higher number of twin bearing ewes for a hill flock system. But I think the fact that with the numbers increasing and also with the ewes spending a lot more time on the hill ground, if you like, it has corrected itself somewhat this year with a slight drop in condition. So it'd be interesting to see at scanning time, we'd expect that it will be reflected in the scan that will be more typical of what you would associate with a hill flock.
Just like we talk about scan, Tomás, probably should have clarified this at the start, but the lowland flock is lambing slightly earlier. You're looking at what, early March on them, and then is it April?
Early March, around the 10th of March. I am consistently trying to push it out all the time to trying to get it to Paddy's Day, but just I guess with the way the grass was this year as well, and I was just, I suppose, a bit worried that it might have ran out on me in regards to when the ram was out. So we're going to be lambing down there around the 10th of March, and then the hill will be around the 1st of April. Both flocks now, the ram is taken in now. Obviously, the lowland was taken in beforehand, but the hill is in now as well. So
they'll be due for scanning now shortly. Just when you mentioned about grass in the back end, look, it's probably been a better back end for most of us this year, but you've been kind of cognizant of that on the farm. You had more grass coming into the back end most years. It has had an impact on what you've done sales-wise with those lambs. So maybe if we start with the lowland flock first, a portion of them in previous years would have been sold as stores. A lot of the hill flock would. How is finishing gone this year for the lowland flock?
Well, the lowland flock, everything was killed in the lowland flock. They were all factoried. Now with the utilisation of the grass, it allowed me to run them longer on grass before introducing meal. And their weights were, were up there between 35 and 45 on grass before we even had to introduce meal, which was a massive bonus for the lowland flock. So it didn't take an awful lot to finish them. They were fed outdoors, and a meal was introduced to them.
The hill flock, they were very much a store system. It was your traditional, come August, they were sold off live.
Yeah.
You've moved away from that. You've gone finishing those lambs.
Yeah, so on the basis of that, then, because obviously I had my lowland flock was more or less they were finished and they were gone. So I then had a lot more grass here at home. So what I started doing then was obviously leaving them on the green ground on the hill farm for as long as I could, and then I brought them home here to finish off the bit of grass that we had around the farm. And then they went from whatever was taken off that, they were killed off grass with a bit of meal, and then the rest of them, when I had to, I had to house them and finish them off in the shed, just to make sure that I had enough grass for the ram for when the ewes went with the ram.
Like, what else? Like, okay, you mentioned you have more grass, but what prompted that change? Okay, you have the facility there to do it, but what prompted the change from going from stores?
I guess it's just, I suppose it's just tradition. It was just tradition. We always, where we're located here, I guess we're probably the further, one of the part, we're fair old distance from any factory, so there's a bit of mileage involved. So it wasn't worth going to a factory every 2 weeks for 10 or 15 lambs. You'd want to be going with 30 or 40 if you had them. So obviously there's a local, with the INHFA here, there's a local group that that's come together. So they're going every week, and we only have to go over, 25 minutes over the road, and there's a collection point. So there was a great opportunity there. They also have a light lamb group with that as well. So if you had lambs, definitely on the hill side of things that were, around 15 kilos, or 30, 35 kilos or 34 kilos live weight with a bit of condition, and they kill out around the 15 kilos or something like that, with good condition, you'll get paid a premium for that. Now, I didn't have many for that, but the option was still there. But that allowed me to obviously be able to move, small amounts of lambs every couple of weeks and not have to do a big journey, and plus the fact that I was in control of it. The most important thing is that you're in control. You're monitoring those lambs regularly. You're weighing them, you're checking them for condition score and whatnot. And I just thought I was in more control. So you nearly knew exactly when they're going in, what you were going to get for them. And I know it was a great year for lambs this year, and the price in the factory was great as it was as a store. But still, you could have, there's only one or there's two marts here locally to me that you could go to, but you could have a great day one day and you could have a very bad day the following week. So I didn't like it. And again, going back over the years, if I sat down and thought of it, I was probably losing money, because I was just, I was one of those kind of people. If I went to the market with lambs, I wasn't going to bring them home, so that I didn't like. And so I was just going to take what I could get, the best price I could get on the day. And I wasn't getting enough. It wasn't sufficing. It wasn't working out. So when I sat down and put it all together.
You have a greater potential margin out of your own system, and so that local group give you that opportunity to get them lambs away.
It did. So, and I know people say like about feeding them, and oh God, you got to put in this and you got to put in that, and you got to buy feed and whatever. And I understand that, but you're still, when you take the feed into it and what you're getting and what they're killing out at and what you're getting, and I know there was a great price for lambs this year, it still paid me to do it. When you work it out on a per head basis, how many bags they may have eaten or whatever, kilo wise, it still worked out that I was making money even when you take the feed out of it and utilizing the grass to its potential there, So
and as you progressed, them lambs obviously went into the shed at some point. When did you house them for more intensive feeding?
They were housed, where we're now, December. So the last bunch would have been housed, I guess, probably towards the mid to end of October, just as when my ram was going out, just so I had enough grass for the ewes.
Like, Damian, just to bring you back at this one, it's not a system for everyone, but Tomás has the facility in the shed to do it, and he had the grass to carry them. I suppose the starting weight there of the type of lamb he was working with had a big impact on that.
Absolutely, Ciarán. Yeah, as you rightly say there, it's not a system that suits everybody. The first thing people like Tomás need to consider, and he had this available, was if he was keeping his store lambs, was it going to have an overall, it's obviously having an overall impact on grass demand in the autumn, but he had adequate grass there to carry them on. Looking back there, I mean, at weaning time, if you take the hill lambs, there was over 2/3 of those lambs that were 25 kgs plus, probably between 25 and even up to 35 kgs at weaning time. And I think through good grassland management and putting them onto the best grass available, Tomás was able to get relatively cheap live weight on those lambs before they started into the finishing period. And that's key to the economics of the system, is that if you can get them up to maybe 35 kgs plus before they start the finishing period. I think there was maybe a handful of Tomás's lighter hill lambs that were maybe slightly less than 35, but the majority of the lambs were over 35 kgs when they joined the finishing group or the finishing period.
Like Tomás, you're finishing them lambs to full spec.
No, they have now. The few that I've left now, they might end up being the light lamb group, because I suppose they're just, I was looking through them the last day, checking their tag numbers, but some of them are actually, a couple of them are triplets, and a lot of them they're all twins. There's no singles left on them, so I suppose they're just maybe the bad performers or whatever, from Yos and whatnot. But I mean, it's only a handful, it's not much. So they may go, it'll be after Christmas now, but they may go for the light lamb, which, currently at the moment is paying very well at $7.50 a kilo. But you got to have the condition right, which is important. Otherwise, they won't pay you. But they probably will go for the light lamb. I don't think they'll get up to they might be a bit longer. They might be in my way, if that makes sense. So I'd like to have them gone there now the first or second week of January, just before I go housing the lowland Joes.
And probably one of the challenges with some of them smaller frame lambs, the tail end is getting over fat as well.
So absolutely, the lighter frame, the lighter framed lamb as the season progresses, there can be, there are certain lambs that you're not going to shove into the French weights. So again, they're ideal for the light lamb market that Tomás mentioned earlier on. So it is important, in any of those intensive indoor finishing systems that drafting is taking place regularly. So because it is a high cost system, and the last thing you want is lambs to be going overweight. So Tomás was probably drafting there around the 45, 46, 47 kilos, if you can get them into that weight. And as he said himself, provided they had the condition on them. But for the light lamb market, if they're starting to approach being over fat, maybe that's the time to move them on and get them going on the light lamb market.
Lads, it was great getting an insight in the system. Tomás, really appreciate you going through it for us. There's been big changes on that farm over the last couple of years, and look, hopefully we'll catch up with you again and find out how the rest of it's going. Thanks very much for your time, lads.
Okay, no problem at all, Ciarán.
Okay, thanks.
We're going to finish the episode up at this point. You can find out more about Tomás's farm and the progress he's making on the Teagasc Better Farm webpage. I've included a link in the description of this podcast. They're also featured on a monthly basis in the Teagasc Sheep newsletter. That's it for me for this episode. Again, for any updates on the sheep program, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Ciarán Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and listen in to any of our episodes.